Hey guys, hello. My name is Dana, and welcome to our first workshop, Introduction to Java by Dana and Amanda. Unfortunately, Amanda couldn't make it today, but she recorded bits for this presentation. I hope you enjoy this workshop and feel free to message me if you have any questions. I'll try my best to answer them. The goal of this workshop is to teach everyone the basics of Java. You can use this to help with your projects, and personally, I think that if you know the basics of one programming language, then you can apply it to others too. So even if you weren't thinking of learning Java, I think this would still be useful. And you could code something using Java for this project too. If you guys have used Java before, can you guys raise your hands? I think you guys can react or something. I'm not sure. Or maybe just send a message. Okay, anyways, if you do know Java, okay, thank you so much. If you do know Java, then you guys would be experts, and let's get started. Okay, so in this workshop, we're going to be discussing 4 areas. The first will be what is Java. This will help you understand the basics of it and what exactly it is used for. And then we will be discussing all the programming basics. We'll then provide you with a chance to use your skill that we learned in this workshop and code up small bits and in exercise walkthrough. And finally, we will give you other ideas about what you can do with Java. So what is Java? The big question. Java is a programming language that has been used in various applications such as desktop apps, enterprise apps, games, and much more. Can anyone give me any examples of apps or program that uses Java? You can either type it in or just unmute yourself and shout it out. If you guys don't know that, it's fine because that's what this workshop is for. And I'll give you guys 10 seconds. Okay, anyways, so Java, apps that uses Java are Netflix, Spotify, Uber, Amazon, and of course, how can we forget Minecraft, the amazing game. So the benefits of Java is it's very easy to learn, it's fast and one of the most popular programming languages in the world. And did you guys know that more than 90% of enterprises desktop runs on Java? That's pretty cool. Okay, so Java basics, this is the basics that you need to know in order to code anything in Java. So what is a class? So right here, as you can see, I wrote public class main. So what exactly is this? A class is basically a template used to create objects and to define objects, data types, and methods. It contains everything we need in it. There are both private and public classes. In this example, we're using a public class right here called main. The advantage of this is it can be accessed from the child class of the same package, whereas private class can't. So let's put it in terms of non-programming languages. Let's put it in like a normal life language. Imagine if someone wants to borrow a book from someone else. So they go to like a public bookshelf, such as a library, and they find the book because the book is public. Whereas if the book was private, then they won't be able to find it because imagine that they might be, I don't know, someone's home or something. So that's basically what's going on right here. So another program can pull any methods from this public class called main because it's public, but if it's private, they won't be able to pull any methods from it. And the next part we see right here is the public static void main. So this is the main method, and we already know what public means. It's the same thing as the public class. So static allows JVM or Java Virtual Machine to load the class into memory and call the main method. If it's not static, then JVM won't be able to call it because there is no object of the class present. The void right here lets the machine know that this program won't be returning anything. For example, if you create another method, you would have to state what the method would return. So this would be, you'll learn this in the next slide. This would be some kind of data type such as int, string, or anything. And in the end, you would have to return, you would have to write return and then the value that you're returning. So for example, return 3. And the main is a required name. When we run the program will look for the main method first. So if we don't have the main method, then the program won't work. It would be confused. It doesn't know where to start. So the main method tells the program where to start. And then the next important part is printing stuff on the screen, because in order to make sure that the program works, you have to print stuff on the screen, right? And there's 2 ways that you can print stuff on the screen. You can either use system.out.println or system.out.print. And the differences between these 2 are system.out.println prints something here and then it skips a line and then prints something else, whereas system.out.print prints something and then it prints something next to it again. And this is an example of it below right here, public static void main, and then it's printing out hello. Okay, so data types, as I said in the last slide, there are 2 types of data types. There's primitive and non-primitive. An example of a primitive data type would be int, long, float, boolean. An example of a non-primitive data type would be string, arrays, and classes. These data types are used to define something. For example, you need to input a user's age right here, as you can see. We use int as the data type and we set the variable name to age. So int stands for integer, so we have to set it to an integer, which is 20 in this case. The advantage of using this is, imagine if you need to write a really long number, such as a binary number that is, I don't know, 20-letter numbers long. It would be inefficient to keep on writing it when you need to use it. So you set it to a variable and then you use that variable to print it. So you could set it to something called number, and then you would just write number to print it out. So as you can see right here, we set it to 20. And when we print it out, the output would be 20. Now, these are the basic Java operators. We have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and modulus. Well, I think everyone knows what these 4 are because it's basic math, right? Now, modulus, I'll explain this one. This one returns a division remainder. For example, if we do 5 modulus 2, the answer we would get is 1. Because 5 divided by 2, there would be a 1 remainder, that's the answer. And here are a few examples of how you use the operators. So it's just like basic math, yes. Now, comments are extremely useful when it comes to programming. These are the basic notations for comments. So there is this one, 2 slashes, it comments on a single line. And there's a slash and a star, and then a star and a slash, which comments out multiple lines. And in this case, if you need to add something more lines than 2, then you would have another star here, which usually your IDE would do it for you. But if it doesn't, then it's good to know that you should add another star here too. So this is an example of commenting your program. So this would comment out a single line. The program won't run this part. The reason you comment stuff is to see what exactly your program is doing. So for example, in the future, if you come back to your program, you might forget about what was going on in your program. The comments will help you remember what is going on. Okay, so if statements. If statements are one of the very basic functions that you should know. So how do these work? The if statement starts with if, and then inside the bracket, there will be a condition. So right here, if, and then a condition. An example of a condition would be number is more than 0. So right here, an example, number 1 is more than 0. Or text equals to hello. Now, the one thing that you should remember about the Java syntax is if there is one equal, you're setting the value like this right here. You're setting text to equal to hello. But if you have two equal signs, you're asking the program if it equals to each other. So right here, we're saying if text equals to hello, then you'll be asking the program. Yes, Drew, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
There's a
Pardon? Sorry, I didn't get that.
there's a question in the
Ah, okay, I see. Okay, so can you go into? Oh yes, of course I can. Okay. Let me go back. Oops. Oh dear. Okay, so data types. You're asking a question about data types, right? So data types, primitive is predefined by Java and it's usually lowercase. There's quite a lot and these are just some examples. And these are non-primitive. So string is basically text that you can use. So for example, hello, and you would need this next to it to set it as a string. Arrays we'll learn in the next few slides. Arrays is basically something that you can store a value in, and it can be like a set of values. And then classes are what we discussed right here. Yes. So I'll give a few examples for this. So int stands for integer, and this would be a number. So for example, 20, and double would be something with a decimal, and Boolean would be a true or false question, or you set a value equals to true or false. Yes, so that's basically it. Yeah, we'll go to the next one now. Okay, so let's talk about if statements. So if statements are basic functions, like I said, and if statement contains a condition, this condition can be anything from the data types that we saw. So for example, if we set the data type right here to an integer, which equals to 5, then it has to be the same value in order for it to work. So for this one, if it's true, which it is, since 5 is more than 0, then this would print out. So like I said about the Java syntax, this would be setting the value to equal to something, whereas this would be asking the program if it equals to each other. Yeah, so the statement won't work if there is only one equal sign. There has to be two in order for it to work. And if text equals to hello, which it does equal to hello, then it would print out the text. And right here, it would print out hello, since text equals to hello. Other than if statements, there's also else if, there's also else. So else if works the same way as if, but it works after the if statement. So for example, if you write if something happens, and if that doesn't happen, then else, if this condition is met, then something will happen. And then finally, you'll have the else statement. If none of those happens, then this will happen instead. Okay, so input and scanners. Since the past few slides, we've been using values set by the programmer, but what if we need the user to input something? First, you would need to import a scanner. So right here, we're importing a scanner. We're using, thankfully, there is a Java library for this, and we don't have to code everything up ourselves. So for this one, we're using java.util.star. The star just means that you're importing everything from this library. So right here, we're importing the scanner. This one, we're declaring the scanner. The YYY is just the name of the scanner, and we're declaring what it is, and we're saying that it's going to input a value right here. This part, this line, system.out.println input, we're telling the user what they need to input. This could be anything. So for example, if you need the user to input a number, you could say, please input a number, and then it would tell the user what to input. This isn't exactly necessary. The program would still work with it as long as the user inputs something, but it's still useful for the user to know what exactly they're supposed to be inputting. Yeah. Now, finally, this line, the ZZZ is just a name for the variable. It's exactly the same as how we set the variable in the past slides. Like this right here, like how we set int number1 to equal to 5. We're doing exactly the same thing. However, we're setting the value to equal to whatever the user inputs. So right here, we're using the scanner name. This has to be exactly the same name as what you called the scanner. And then we're using next int. Since our data type is an int, we have to use an next int to get the data. Okay, so this is the video presentation that Amanda recorded for us since she couldn't make it today. So if you guys have any questions, you can ask me. I'll check the questions right now. Okay, why do some statements end with semicolon and some don't? Well, Java syntax usually force you to end with semicolon. So most of the statements here are supposed to end with semicolons, such as the system.out.println, and there will be an error if there is no semicolon. It really depends on Java syntax and how it works. It's sometimes really annoying since you might go through the whole program and you wrote like 300 lines of code and randomly the program doesn't work. And the only reason it doesn't work is because of the semicolon. So you just have to make sure that you always use the correct syntax. So one thing to also remember about Java syntax is you have to use the correct type of letters, so like capital letters or lowercase letters, or else it won't work. Okay, let's watch the video. I'm not sure if you guys can hear it. Let me check. Sorry, 10 seconds.
Hi guys, I'm Amanda and I'm going to be taking over the rest of this presentation. So we're going to continue on with Java basics, and now we're going to look at while loops. While loops are basically a loop that run while a condition is being met. It's basically structured in this manner, whereby the condition is placed inside this bracket here, and within the curly brackets you would do a certain thing. So here's an example. Here we are creating an int, and it's called number, and we're assigning it the value 0. Then we have a while loop, and the condition is that it will run as long as number is less than 10. So we start at 0, and we're going to do number equals number plus 1. So basically, if we sub it in, it will be 0 equals 0 plus 1. So after this loop, number will have been changed to 1. And that will continue looping until number reaches 9. So now we're going to look at for loops, where it loops an exact number of times. So with while loop, it loops while condition is being met, while for is for a set number. Here's the basic structure of it, and it comprises 3 aspects. The first one is where you declare the integer I and you assign it the starting value. And the second aspect is sort of similar to the while loop in how it runs until it reaches a certain like upper bound. So for this one, it'll continue running until I is 4. And the last part is the how you increment the for loop. So here it's just incrementing by 1, which is I++, or it can be rewritten as I equals I plus 1, or you could also do I equals I plus 2, I equals I plus 3, and so on and so forth. So now we're going to be looking at some examples, and here's a for loop. It starts at 1 and it finishes at 10 because there's a less than equal sign, and it also increments by 1. Within this for loop, we have a print statement, and we're going to print high every time it loops. So essentially, it'll print high 10 times. The next example is we have a variable called count, and it's of type integer, and we make it equal to 0. And then within this for loop, once again, it starts at 1 and then ends at 10, and it increments by 1 each time. Inside here, we're taking count and we're adding the current value of it to 1. So every time this thing loops, count will be added by 1. And at the end of this code, it prints count equals plus count. And here we're just referring to the variable. Here we're just referring to the variable count. So the result would be count equals 10. Now we're going to look at arrays, and arrays are different to other data types because they store multiple values. It basically works like this. You have your data type, that should be an A, and
Hey guys, I saw some people say that you guys can't hear the it's cutting off sometimes. I just wanted to let you guys know that if it's cutting off, we're also recording this too, so you guys can watch back at this too. Okay, let's continue.
and we have square brackets, and there's also the variable name here, and you make it equals to curly brackets, and within these curly brackets, you place the items inside the array. Now, an array has something called an index, which is the position in the array. It starts from 0, and it continues going up by 1. So item 1 would be 0, item 2 would be 1, and it would continue on like that. In terms of examples, here we have an array called names of type string containing Mary, Joe, and John. And within this for loop, we're going to print each name in the array. So it's basically looping until it reaches value 2, because it loops as long as I is less than 3. So it goes 0, 1, 2. And if you look at the number of runs, so that would be 3 because we have 0, 1, 2, and then that would basically loop through our names array, and it would print the current index in names. So basically, when I is 0, this is like the first run through, you would refer to names, square bracket 0, and you would look at the array and find that. So since 0 is the starting, it would print Mary, and it would continue on like that because I continues to increment. And then here's the result. And now we're going to be doing an exercise walkthrough. Here is our prompt.
Okay guys, at this part you guys can code it up as we're going along, and we're going to help you through this video too.
And I'm just going to read it out to you. So we create two integers, number 1 and number 2, assigning the values of your choice. Create an if statement that runs if number 2 is greater than number 1 and prints number 2 is bigger than number 1. And we're going to read part 2 later. And let's comment the code as we do this. So here's part 1, and I already prepared sort of like the general outline where we insert our code. And since they asked us to comment our code, let's start by doing so. So now we're we're first gonna declare variables and assign values. And we have to create two integers, number 1 and number 2. So let's do so. So here I just assigned 5 and 10, but honestly you could do whatever number you want. And the if statement, it will run if number 2 is greater than number 1. And within this, it asks us to print number 2 is bigger than number 1. So let's just copy and paste the code here. And yeah, so we can continue commenting our code by saying end if. It's really good to do this for good, like, developing good programming habits. Whenever you're finished with like a big block of code, you can end it with a comment that kind of says what it is, like and while, and for, and if, and you can even comment on the top depending on what it does. So it runs if number 2 is greater than number 1. Yeah, so that's part 1, and now let's look at part 2. Part 2 said, then create an array that stores 3 numbers of your choice. Loop through this array and print the numbers out along the way, while also adding them to an int called sum. After this loop runs, print out the sum. Comment your code as you do this again. So yeah, we're gonna do that. So I'm just gonna delete part 1 here and add part 2. Let's just make this a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, and then so now let's get on with the task. So we're gonna create it inside here. So create an array that stores 3 numbers of your choice. So since they said your choice, you can basically do we can do int or double. I'm just gonna stick with int. So int square brackets, and then I'm gonna name it numbers. 3 numbers, so I'll just do 1, 2, 3. And then we have to loop through this array and print the numbers out along the way. So here we have the option of looping by a while loop or a for loop, but the best way is just to use a for loop because we're kind of looping through it a certain number of times. So I think it'll make more sense now. So for int I equals 0, because we're going to start at the index 0. Next is kind of the upper boundary, I is 3, and I plus plus. Let's do this. So to kind of reiterate what I'm doing here is that I'm starting at 0 because it starts at the index, and this thing will continue to run as long as I is less than 3. So it'll run from 0, 1, and 2, which is basically the enough to get through this whole array. So within this, the instructions ask us to print the numbers out along the way. And we do so by doing number square bracket I to get the index at each point. And the next, it asks us to add them to an int called sum. So what we have to do here is you have to create sum outside, because if we create it inside, it'll continue to be recreated every time it runs, so its state will not save. So let's create up here. This isn't an array, so we don't need the square brackets, and we're just going to do sum equals 0. Because we haven't run the for loop yet, so right now the sum is 0. Every time it runs, we're going to add the current state to sum. So it will basically be like this. Once again, referring to each index in the array. And then let's comment it by saying in4. And we have one last thing to do, which is after this loop runs, print out the sum. So we can just go like that. And yeah, so that's it for the exercise walkthrough. And now we're going to talk about what else you can do with Java. So this is kind of like an introductory crash course kind of to Java, and it really covers the basics, but although these are basics, they're fundamentals you need to know when coding, and it's really good to have a good foundation with these. So some other things you can do with Java are that you can read from or write to files, you can randomly generate numbers, and you can also utilize something called object-oriented programming. So we've also suggested some beginner projects you can try, which is first to create a calculator program. And you can basically doing that by utilizing all the different operators and using if statements and maybe even while loops if you wanted to. You also have the ability to create a virtual restaurant program that asks for input from your user and sort of lets them kind of choose what's on the menu. Or you can even create a quiz that interacts with the user and asks them a bunch of questions. And lastly, you can use loops to create cool patterns or images. So that's just kind of like a fun thing you can try out. And yeah, so that's all for today's workshop. And I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, you can email us at womaninstemth@gmail.com. So that's it for the presentation, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.
Okay, guys, so I'll be answering any questions that you guys might have. I'll just look at the chat right now. If you guys have any questions, you guys can either send it in the chat or you can just unmute yourself. Oh, wait a second. Okay, or if we're going to end this presentation in like 10 minutes at 9:50. So if you guys have any questions or you don't want to say it here right now, guys can just email us here, womaninstemth@gmail.com. We're going to wait for a few minutes. So can you make a countdown timer with while loops? Well, yes, you can. Okay, I'll go through the questions. So countdown timers with while loops, you can make it with while loops. You can also make it, but you would also need other syntax and stuff to make it work. There's quite a few websites you can use to research about this. It's quite a basic program and I'm sure you can make it. And okay, please cover classmate. I'll go back to that slide. Okay, sorry, give me 10 seconds. Okay, this part, right? So what this part basically is, the class right here, this whole syntax is what is required by Java. You need this for this to work. So the main part, this can be called anything you want. The public class, I called my class main just for this workshop, but you can call it anything. It also depends on your program. Sometimes people call it calculator app, depending on what kind of program they're creating. And the public class, if you would like me to explain more about that, the public class basically, public, the word public basically means that other classes can come into this class and take the methods that we wrote in this class to that other class. So for example, if you're creating, let's say an app, for example, you're creating a really complex app that has a lot of screens, you might create one class for each screen, but you would need methods from the other class. So you would call the method from that class and then use it in the other class. I hope this isn't confusing. I'm saying class quite a lot. But yeah, basically, and this part is just required by Java. You need to call it main because main tells the program where the program starts and what it should run first. So this is basically a method called main. Other than main, you can create any method. So for example, if you're creating a calculator program, you might call it addition. And then in between, you would do A plus B or whatever you're trying to do. And this part just is called the Java command line argument, and it tells us the type of the program. So for this one, it's strings, as we learned for in data type. And the static just lets Java virtual machine load the class into memory. And if it's not static, then it won't be able to call it, and because there will be no object in the class present. And that's basically it. If you have it, if this is a bit too confusing or anything, you can ask me. Yes, this part. Public static void main. Okay, so this part is the same as the top part. It's exactly the same. This is just an example. And like I said, the public is it lets the other program call this method, and the static just let the class be loaded into memory, and the main is just a required name. Okay, yeah, so Drew said that it would be easier for loops. Yeah, it would probably be easier for loops. We went over this in the video. I'll also share this presentation with you in case you guys miss any parts of the video. But okay, wait, sorry, I'll go here. So for loops, right here, this is how for loop works. So right here, you are declaring what the loop is. Sorry, right here, you're declaring the value for the for loop. So for example, we're incrementing it by 1 and it starts from 1. We're saying that this is an integer I called which equals to 1, and I has to be less than 5. So this loop will keep on going until it doesn't fit this argument anymore, and it will keep on incrementing it by 1. So for loops are kind of complex to understand, but this is an example. So for I equals to 1, so I will start from 1. If I is less than or equal to 10, it will keep on running the program, will keep on running the loop, and I will increase by 1. So this example would print high out 10 times, since in between that, we're writing high. And this one is the same. We're starting the count from 0. We cut the count to equals to 0. and then we're incrementing it by 1, and it starts from 1. So like right here, we wrote the comment that it would add 1 to count 10 times right here. And then the result would be count equals 10. If you guys have any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, if you guys have any questions, you can contact us through this email, womaninstemth@gmail.com. If you're creating your project using Java, you can also email us and we'll help to guide you as much as we can. And yeah, that's it. Can you go through an example of how to print something slowly, please? Like, yes, of course. Let's create a new slide then. Okay, sorry, I'll create. Okay, I'll just write it here. So we would have to start with a class. So, okay, let's copy this part so that it's quicker. Right here. Okay, so this part is where you start with your whole program. This is required. So whatever you name it, your ID will usually help you with the class name. So if you name your project calculator, then your ID would call your class calculator for you. So in this case, we would be naming our project main. And then here would just be the main argument. And to print out something, we would have to write system.out.println or system, sorry, let's not forget the Java syntax, system.out.print. Now the difference between two of these are this one would print something out and skip a line. So for example, let's print something out right here. We're going to print out hello. Hello. Oh God. Hello right here. Okay. And then we're going to print out something else too. Let's print out hi. Okay, we're trying to print hello and hi. After we run the program, this would be the output. Output would be hello, and then it would skip a line, and then it would be hi. But then if we don't use print line, it would be something else. It would be like this. Just copy this. If we use print, it would be like this. Print hello and print hi. The output would be, let's just make this a bit smaller so that everyone can see. Output would be hello and then hi, like this. So that's basically the difference between system.out.println and system.out.print. The print line just tells the program to skip a line. I'll also give a few syntax for everyone. So if you want to write something, but you're using only one system.out.println, you can do this, backslash and n, and then hi like this. If we don't have that, this would still skip a line right here. this would still skip a line for you since that's the Java syntax for skipping a line, and this would still be the output. So yeah, there's quite a lot of syntax for Java syntax that you should know, and it would help you write your program. I personally always use system.out.println since I think that it's very easy to use and it's better to see what's going on. Yeah, but you always have to remember that you need this. And I'll give another example. If you would like to print out a value that is already set at by a variable. So for example, if you do this, number equals to 6, int has to be lowercase. You could do, you wouldn't need this, you could just do number, and then the output would be 6, just that. So that's basically how you print something in Java. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? I'll be happy to answer them before we have to end the meeting. Okay, if anyone has any question, then you guys can just email us here. If you're creating your project using Java, or if you have any question related to your project, we'll try our best to help you as much as we can, okay? We can't help too much since that would be unfair to everyone else, but we'll definitely help a bit, yes. So if you have any question, just email us here and we're going to end this meeting right here. Okay, guys.